A stranger returns to claim the ranch he abandoned 5 years ago, only to find a woman and child living in the home he left to rot. She saved the land. She rebuilt what he destroyed, and she has no idea the exhausted drifter standing at her door is the man who owns everything she's fought to keep. Now he has 30 days before the county auctions it away. 30 days to decide whether to take back what's legally his or walk away from the only place that ever felt like home. Stay with me until the end, hit that like button, and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this story travels. The county notice arrived on a Tuesday, delivered by a clerk who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. Cole Mercer read it twice before the words actually registered. 30 days. That's all the time he had before the ranch, his ranch, technically, got sold off to whoever showed up with cash and a willingness to gamble on cursed land. 5 years. 5 years of drifting from one dusty town to the next, working ranches that belonged to other men, sleeping in bunkhouses that smelled like tobacco and regret. 5 years of telling himself he'd never go back. The paper crumpled in his fist before he could stop himself. He'd expected this, in a way. You don't abandon property and expect the world to just wait around. Taxes pile up. County gets impatient. Eventually, they take what you won't claim. That was fine. That was probably for the best. Let someone else deal with the ghosts. Except now he had to go back. Had to see it one last time before they auctioned it off. Had to make sure there wasn't anything left worth keeping, though he already knew the answer to that. There was nothing left. The fire had seen to it. The ride took 3 days. Cole pushed his horse harder than he should have, but the animal didn't complain. Maybe it sensed his urgency. Maybe it just wanted to get the whole miserable journey over with. The landscape changed gradually as he traveled west. Flat plains gave way to rolling hills. Sparse grass thickened into something that almost looked green if you squinted. Trees appeared, scattered at first, then clustering into groves that provided actual shade. The air smelled different here. Cleaner. Like rain even when the sky was clear. He recognized the old fence line 2 miles out. Someone had repaired it. New posts stood where rotted ones should have been. The wire was taut, properly strung, not sagging into the dirt like he remembered. Cole slowed his horse, stared at the fence. That didn't make sense. He kept riding, slower now, scanning the landscape for other changes. The creek looked fuller than it had any right to be this time of year. The grass was thicker, healthier, like someone had been managing it. And there, was that cattle? He counted 6 head grazing near the water. Good stock, too, not the half-starved strays you usually found on abandoned land. His chest tightened. The house appeared over the next rise, and Cole pulled his horse to a complete stop. Smoke curled from the chimney. He sat there, frozen, staring at that thin column of gray rising into the afternoon sky. His mind went blank. Then it started racing, trying to make sense of what he was seeing. Squatters, maybe. Drifters looking for shelter. Happened all the time on abandoned property. But squatters didn't repair fences, didn't raise cattle, didn't keep a chimney smoking in spring. He urged his horse forward, moving on instinct now rather than thought. The garden hit him next. A full acre, maybe more, stretching along the south side of the house. Neat rows of something green, vegetables probably, though he couldn't tell what kind from this distance. Bean poles stood in careful lines. A scarecrow leaned at a crooked angle near the far end, dressed in clothes that looked newer than anything Cole owned. Laundry hung on a line strung between 2 posts. Sheets, shirts, smaller things that might have been children's clothes. They moved in the breeze like flags. Children's clothes. His throat went dry. Cole dismounted 50 yards from the house, more out of confusion than caution. His legs felt unsteady. He tied his horse to a post that definitely hadn't been there 5 years ago and just stood there, taking it all in. The house looked good. Better than good. Someone had replaced the shutters. The porch had been rebuilt. He could see fresh lumber mixed with the old boards. New shingles patched the roof in spots. The door hung straight on its hinges instead of listing to one side. It looked like a home, like people lived here, like it hadn't been abandoned and left to rot while its owner ran away from memories too heavy to carry. A ram appeared around the corner of the house. Cole blinked. The animal was massive, easily 200 pounds, with curved horns that looked capable of cracking skulls. It stopped when it saw him, head lowering slightly, dark eyes fixed on the stranger with an intensity that made Cole's hand drift toward the knife on his belt. They stared at each other. The ram didn't move, didn't charge, just watched him with the kind of patient awareness that made Cole wonder if the animal was smarter than it had any right to be. "Easy," Cole said quietly, though he wasn't sure if he was talking to the ram or himself. The front door opened. A woman stepped out onto the porch. She was tall, taller than most women Cole knew, with broad shoulders and arms that looked like they'd done real work. Her hair was pulled back in a practical braid, dark brown shot through with lighter strands the sun had bleached. She wore a simple dress, faded but clean, with an apron tied around her waist. She looked at him without fear, without surprise. Just steady, careful assessment, like she was used to strangers showing up and had learned to read them quickly. "Can I help you?" Her voice was lower than he expected. Calm. The kind of calm that came from practice rather than nature. Cole's mouth opened. Nothing came out. What was he supposed to say? "I'm the owner. I've been gone 5 years. Didn't think anyone would be here. Didn't think there'd be anything left worth living in." The woman waited. Behind her, through the open door, Cole could see into the house. Furniture, curtains, a table with plates still on it from a recent meal. Everything clean and cared for and lived in. He cleared his throat. "I'm looking for work. Heard there might be ranches out this way hiring." The lie came out smooth, automatic. He'd told it 100 times in 100 towns. The woman's expression didn't change. She looked him over, his worn clothes, the dust coating his boots, the horse that needed rest and water. Her gaze lingered on his hands, rough and calloused in ways that proved he wasn't lying about knowing work. "You any good with fences?" she asked. "Yes, ma'am." "Livestock?" "Raised cattle most of my life." She nodded slowly, still studying him. The ram had moved closer, positioning itself between them, but not in a threatening way. More like it was curious or protective. "That's Moses," the woman said, noticing Cole's glance. "He doesn't like most people, but he's not trying to kill you, so I suppose that's something." "Big animal." "He thinks he's bigger than he is." She paused. "I'm Mara Whitlock." The name meant nothing to him. He'd never heard it before, never seen this woman in his life. So how the hell was she living in his house? "Cole," he said, because giving his last name felt like admitting too much. "Cole Mercer." If the name registered with her, she didn't show it. Maybe she'd never known who owned the property. Maybe whoever told her about the place had left that detail out. Or maybe she just didn't care. "You eaten today, Mr. Mercer?" The question caught him off guard. Not recently." "Well?" Mara stepped back, pulling the door wider. "I've got stew on. You can water your horse at the trough, then come inside. We'll talk about work after you've had a meal." Cole stood there, completely lost. This wasn't how this was supposed to go. He was supposed to find ruins. Ashes. Maybe a collapsed barn and a chimney standing alone like a gravestone. He was supposed to walk through the wreckage, confirm there was nothing worth saving, and leave before the memories dragged him under. He wasn't supposed to find life. Wasn't supposed to smell bread baking. Wasn't supposed to stand in front of a woman who looked at a dusty stranger and saw someone worth feeding. "Mr. Mercer?" Mara's voice pulled him back. "Your horse is thirsty." "Right, yes, thank you." He moved on autopilot, leading his horse to the trough. The water was clean, fresh. Someone had filled it recently. The animal drank deep while Cole's hands worked through the motions of loosening the saddle, checking the hooves, doing all the small tasks that gave him time to think. This was insane. He should tell her the truth right now. Should pull out the county notice and explain exactly who he was and why he was here. But then what? She'd have to leave. Her and whoever else lived here, those children's clothes on the line suggested at least one kid. They'd have to pack up and go, and where would they go? What kind of woman lived alone on abandoned property? The kind who had nowhere else? Cole's jaw tightened. 30 days. The auction was in 30 days. He could figure this out before then. Could decide what to do without making any rash choices. And in the meantime, she was offering him a meal, maybe a place to sleep. And he could see the ranch, could understand what had happened here while he was gone, Could maybe understand why the sight of smoke rising from that chimney had hit him harder than anything had in 5 years. Moses followed him to the porch. The ram's hooves made soft sounds on the dirt, steady and deliberate. When Cole reached the steps, the animal settled down in a patch of shade, still watching, but apparently satisfied the stranger wasn't a threat. Cole climbed the steps, his steps, on his porch, leading to his door, and walked inside. The interior punched the air from his lungs. It was different. Everything was different. The furniture wasn't his. The curtains weren't his. The rug in the center of the room was new, woven in a pattern he'd never seen before. But the bones were the same. The fireplace he'd built with his own hands, the window that looked out toward the eastern pasture, the beam across the ceiling where he'd carved his initials when he was 20 years old. "Sit anywhere," Mara said, moving toward the stove. "Ellie's out checking snares, but she'll be back soon." Ellie. A daughter, then. Cole sat at the table. It wasn't his table, his had burned, but it occupied the same space, positioned to catch the afternoon light the same way. He put his hands flat on the surface, feeling the smooth wood, trying to ground himself. Mara ladled stew into a bowl and set it in front of him. The smell made his stomach clench. When was the last time he'd eaten something that wasn't jerky or beans cooked over a campfire? "Thank you," he managed. She poured coffee into a tin cup. "You traveling far?" "Just looking for work, like I said." "Where from?" He named a town 3 days east. Not a lie, exactly. He'd passed through there on the way. Mara nodded, taking a seat across from him. She had her own cup of coffee, but no food. Just sat there, hands wrapped around the cup, watching him eat. It should have been uncomfortable. Should have made him nervous. Instead, it felt oddly normal. Like this was something that happened regularly, strangers showing up, getting fed, sitting in this kitchen that used to be his. "You live here alone?" Cole asked, then immediately regretted it. Too personal, too direct. But Mara didn't seem bothered. "Just me and my daughter. We manage. That's a lot of land for 2 people. We've got help when we need it. Neighbors come by during harvest. Sometimes we trade work." Neighbors. Cole tried to remember who used to live closest. The Hendersons had a place about 5 miles south. The Pratts were north, closer to 7 miles. Both families had been there when he left. "Been here long?" he asked. Mara's expression shifted. Something guarded slipped into her eyes. "Long enough." The door banged open before Cole could figure out how to respond. A girl burst in, maybe 7 or 8 years old, cheeks flushed from running. She had her mother's dark hair but lighter eyes, gray or pale blue, hard to tell in the dim interior. Her dress was patched but sturdy, and she carried a brace of rabbits that looked almost as big as she was. "Mama, I got 3. Moses tried to—" She stopped dead when she saw Cole. They stared at each other. The girl's eyes went wide, then narrow with suspicion that would have been funny if it wasn't so sharp. "Ellie," Mara said quietly, "we have a guest. This is Mr. Mercer. He's looking for work." "We don't need help," Ellie said immediately. "Ellie, we don't. We're doing fine." Cole set down his spoon. The girl was still holding the rabbits, using them almost like a shield or a weapon. He couldn't tell which. "Your snares are well placed," he said. 3 rabbits is good hunting." Ellie's eyes narrowed further. "How would you know?" "Used to hunt rabbits when I was your age. Never caught 3 in one morning, though. You must be better at it than I was." The suspicion didn't leave her face, but something else flickered there, too. Pride, maybe. Or just the natural response of a kid being acknowledged for doing something difficult. "Moses helped," she admitted grudgingly. "That ram? He's not just a ram. He's Moses." "Right. Moses." Cole fought the urge to smile. "What's he do exactly?" "He guards things. And people. And he's really good at knowing who's bad." "Ellie," Mara said again, firmer this time. "Take those rabbits outside and clean them. We'll talk about manners later." The girl shot Cole one more suspicious look, then trudged back outside, rabbits swinging from her hand. The door banged shut behind her. Mara sighed. "I apologize. She's not usually quite that... protective?" "I was going to say rude, but yes, protective." Cole picked up his spoon again. "She's smart to be careful around strangers." "Maybe." Mara stood refilling his coffee without asking if he wanted more. "But you're not staying a stranger if you're going to work here." The words hung in the air between them. "You're offering me a job?" Cole asked carefully. "If you want it. I can't pay much, trade for room and board mostly, but the work's steady, and there's plenty of it." She paused. "North fence line needs replacing. Barn roof's got weak spots, and I've got more land cleared than I can plant alone." Cole looked down at his bowl. The stew was good, better than good, the kind of meal someone made when they cared about the people eating it. He should say no. Should finish eating, thank her for the hospitality, and ride away before this got any more complicated. But where would he go? Back to another bunkhouse? Another ranch where he was just hired muscle, doing work that meant nothing to anyone? And this place, his place, whether she knew it or not, it was alive. Someone had brought it back from the dead. Someone had looked at ruins and seen possibility. He wanted to understand how. Wanted to see what else had changed. Wanted to know who this woman was and how she'd ended up here, alone with a daughter and a ram named Moses, rebuilding something Cole had been too broken to save. "I'll stay," he heard himself say. "If you're sure you want the help." Mara's expression softened, just slightly, just enough to show relief underneath the careful control. "I'm sure," she said. "You can take the room in the barn. It's not much, but it's dry and warm enough." Room in the barn. Cole almost laughed. He'd built that room himself years ago, thinking they might need it for a hired hand someday. Never imagined he'd be the one sleeping there. "That'll work fine," he said. He finished his stew in silence while Mara moved around the kitchen, putting things away, wiping down surfaces that were already clean. Nervous energy, maybe. Or just the habits of someone used to staying busy. Outside, he could hear Ellie talking to Moses. The ram's hooves scraped against wood, probably the porch. The girl's voice rose and fell in a one-sided conversation that suggested Moses was a very good listener. Cole carried his bowl to the wash basin. Mara tried to take it from him, but he shook his head. "I can clean up after myself." "Suit yourself." He washed the bowl, the spoon, the cup, dried them, and set them on the shelf where dishes lived. His hands remembered the motion even though nothing else was the same. "I'll show you the barn," Mara said. They walked out together. Ellie was sitting on the porch steps, Moses lying beside her with his head in her lap. The rabbits hung from a nail on the porch post, already skinned and ready for cooking. The girl watched Cole with those sharp, suspicious eyes as he followed her mother across the yard. The barn had been rebuilt too. New doors hung on the front. The roof looked solid, though Mara had mentioned weak spots. Inside it smelled like hay and animals and wood that hadn't quite finished curing. "Stalls are mostly empty," Mara said, leading him toward the back. "I've only got one milk cow and the horse. Used to have more, but—" She trailed off. "Used to have more." Cole wondered what that story was. What had happened to reduce her livestock? Money problems? Bad luck? Or just the reality of running a ranch alone? The room was exactly where he remembered it. Small, maybe 10 by 12, with a narrow bed, a chair, and a trunk that probably held spare blankets. A window looked out toward the eastern hills. "There's an extra blanket in the trunk if you need it," Mara said. "And you can stable your horse in the second stall." "This is good. Thank you." She nodded, already turning to leave. Then she stopped, hand on the doorframe, not quite looking at him. "Mr. Mercer?" "Yes, ma'am?" "Why'd you really come here?" The question caught him completely unprepared. He'd thought the lie had held, thought he'd sold it well enough. But Mara's eyes, when she finally looked at him, were too knowing, too sharp. Like she'd seen through men's bullshit before and wasn't impressed by his version. Cole's mind raced. He could double down on the lie, could spin some story about hearing about work, needing a change, wanting to settle somewhere quiet. Or he could tell her a piece of the truth. Not all of it, but enough. "I used to live around here," he said slowly. "Long time ago. Thought I'd see if anything looked familiar." "Does it?" "Some of it." Mara studied his face. Whatever she saw there seemed to satisfy her because she nodded again. "Well, welcome back then. Supper's at sundown. Don't be late or Ellie will eat your share." She left him there, standing in a room he'd built, on land he'd abandoned, working for a woman who had no idea she was talking to a ghost. Cole sat on the bed. It creaked under his weight. Different bed, same creak. He put his head in his hands and tried to figure out what the hell he'd just done. Through the window, he could see the house. Smoke still rising from the chimney, laundry still dancing in the breeze. A woman and a girl moving around inside, going about their lives in a place they'd made their own. Moses appeared in the yard, wandering over to the barn with that same deliberate, purposeful walk. The Rams stopped just outside Cole's window and looked in. Their eyes met. "I don't know what I'm doing either," Cole told the animal. Moses huffed, almost like agreement, and settled down in the dirt outside the window, apparently standing guard, or maybe just claiming a good spot to nap. Cole lay back on the bed, staring at the ceiling beams he'd cut and placed himself. The wood had darkened with age, but still held strong. He'd come here to bury the past, to see ruins, and confirm that everything he'd built and lost was truly gone. Instead, he'd found it alive again. Different, but alive. And he had no idea what to do about that. Outside, Ellie's voice carried across the yard, arguing with Moses about something only they understood. Mara's footsteps crossed the porch. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed. The ranch breathed around him, living, working, continuing forward like it had never been abandoned at all. Cole closed his eyes and tried not to think about the county notice folded in his saddlebag. Tried not to think about the 30 days ticking away. Tried not to think about what would happen when Mara found out who he really was. But the thoughts came anyway, relentless as rain. He'd lied to her, was still lying. Every moment he stayed here without telling the truth was another layer of deception. And yet the sight of smoke from that chimney had cracked something open inside him that he thought was sealed forever. The sound of a child's laughter, the smell of bread baking, the simple, impossible fact of life continuing in a place he'd left for dead. Maybe he could stay just a few days. Help with the fence, fix the barn roof, do enough work to justify the meals and the shelter. Then he'd figure out the rest. Tell her the truth. Face whatever came after that. Just a few days. That's what he told himself as exhaustion finally pulled him under. Just a few days, and then he'd leave. Moses, still stationed outside the window, seemed to know better. The ram's dark eyes watched the barn door like he was expecting the stranger to try running. And maybe, on some level even Cole didn't want to acknowledge, Moses was right. Because for the first time in 5 years, Cole Mercer had stopped moving, had stopped running from the ghosts that chased him from town to town. He'd found the one place he'd sworn never to return to. And against all reason, against all his better judgment, against every instinct screaming at him to leave before this went sideways, it felt like coming home. The rooster woke him before dawn, screaming its head off like the world was ending. Cole jerked upright, momentarily disoriented by the unfamiliar ceiling, the smell of hay, the shaft of gray pre-dawn light cutting through the window. Then he remembered where he was. He dressed quickly, splashing water on his face from the basin someone, Mara probably, had left outside his door. The water was cold enough to shock him fully awake. His reflection in the small mirror above the basin looked rough. 3 days of trail dust, lines around his eyes that hadn't been there 5 years ago, beard that needed trimming. He looked like what he was, a drifter, a man running from something. When he stepped outside, Moses was already awake, standing in the yard like a sentinel. The ram's ears swiveled toward Cole, tracking his movement across to the well. "Morning," Cole said to the animal, feeling ridiculous. Moses huffed and went back to staring at the house. Cole drew water, drank deep, then filled the bucket and carried it to his horse. The animal nickered softly, pressing its nose against his shoulder in greeting. At least someone was happy to see him. He was checking the horse's left rear shoe. It had felt loose yesterday when he heard the problem. A crack ran through the metal, small but definable. Another day or two and the whole shoe would split. "Damn," he muttered. "Something wrong?" He turned to find Mara standing a few feet away, already dressed for the day, hair in that same practical braid. How long had she been there? "Shoe's cracked," he said, straightening. "Horse threw one a few days back. I replaced it, but looks like I did a poor job of it." Mara moved closer, bending to examine the hoof when Cole lifted it. Her assessment was quick and competent. "You've got maybe a day before that goes completely. There's a smithy in town, but that's 8 miles. I can reshoe him myself if you've got the tools. Forge is cold. Would take half a day just to get it hot enough." She straightened, brushing dust from her hands. "Or you could just stay off him for a few days. Let that shoe hold while you work here. By the time you're ready to move on, I can have Henderson's boy come out. He does smithing work." It was a practical solution, too practical, like she was giving him an excuse to stay without making it sound like charity. Cole found himself nodding before he'd fully thought it through. That'll work. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. You haven't seen the fence line. She wasn't kidding. The northern boundary was a disaster. Posts rotted through, wire sagging so low in places that even Moses could have stepped over it. Some sections had collapsed entirely, leaving gaps wide enough to drive a wagon through. How long has it been like this? Cole asked, walking the line. Since I got here. Maybe before. Mara stood a few yards back, arms crossed. I patched what I could, but I don't have the materials to replace the whole thing. Been saving up, but... She didn't finish the sentence. Didn't have to. Money was tight. Materials were expensive. A woman alone with a child couldn't do everything. Cole knelt beside a collapsed section, testing the wire. Rusted through in spots, but salvageable if they were careful. You've got lumber? Some. Not enough for all the posts we'd need. We can cut new ones from that stand of cedar near the creek. Good wood. Lasts longer than pine. Mara's expression shifted. Something flickered there. Surprise, maybe, or suspicion. How'd you know there's cedar by the creek? Cole's stomach dropped. Stupid. Careless. He'd walked this property 100 times, knew every tree and rock and curve of land. Of course he knew about the cedar. Saw it yesterday, he said, keeping his voice level. When I was riding in. Noticed the trees. She studied him for a long moment. Cole forced himself to meet her eyes, to not look away like a man with something to hide. Finally, Mara nodded. We'll need to start cutting today if we want to get this done before summer. They worked through the morning, falling into a rhythm that felt oddly natural. Mara knew the land, knew what needed doing, and in what order. Cole knew fences, knew how to set posts and string wire so they'd last more than one season. Ellie showed up around mid-morning, Moses trailing behind her like an oversized dog. She watched them work with those suspicious eyes, sitting cross-legged in the grass, picking at a piece of bread. You know what you're doing? She called out to Cole. Some, he said, driving a post deeper into the ground. Mama can do it herself. I know she can. Then why are you here? Ellie, Mara said, not looking up from the wire she was splicing. Go check the snares. I checked them already. Then find something else to do. The girl huffed but didn't move. Just sat there, watching, judging. Moses settled beside her, and they made quite a pair. Both stubborn, both protective, both clearly unconvinced that this stranger was worth keeping around. By noon, Cole's shirt was soaked through with sweat. The sun beat down harder than it had any right to in spring, and the work was brutal. Digging post holes in ground that hadn't been worked in years, hauling cedar logs from the creek, trimming them to size. Mara worked beside him the whole time, matching him pace for pace. She didn't complain, didn't slow down, just kept moving with the steady determination of someone who'd learned that stopping meant falling behind. You've done this before, Cole said, more statement than question. Had to learn quick. Mara straightened, wiping sweat from her forehead with the back of her hand. First winter, I lost half my garden to deer because the fence was down. Couldn't afford to lose anything else. You built this place up yourself? All of it? Something shuddered in her expression. Wasn't much here when I arrived. House was barely standing. Barn was worse. But it was empty and it was available, so I made it work. Cole wanted to ask more. How she'd found the place, why she'd stayed, where Ellie's father was. But the walls had gone up. He recognized the signs. Some stories didn't get told to strangers, no matter how helpful they were with fence posts. They broke for lunch back at the house. Cold chicken and bread that Mara had baked that morning, eaten at the kitchen table while Ellie chattered about Moses's adventures chasing rabbits. He almost caught one, but then he remembered he doesn't eat meat, Ellie said seriously, so he just stood there and watched it run away. Very noble of him, Cole said. Moses is always noble. Ellie, eat your food, Mara said. Cole's eyes drifted around the kitchen while they ate. Everything was clean and well kept, but there were signs of wear if you looked close enough. The curtains had been mended multiple times. The plates didn't match, collected from different sources over time, probably. One of the table legs had been replaced with wood that was slightly different from the others. Making do. Getting by. Surviving. His chest tightened. After lunch, they went back to the fence. The afternoon was somehow hotter than the morning, and Cole's hand started blistering despite years of calluses. Mara noticed him favoring his left palm and disappeared for a few minutes, returning with a tin of salve. Here. I'm fine. You'll be useless tomorrow if those blisters split. Just use it. He took the tin. The salve smelled like mint and something else he couldn't identify. It stung when he rubbed it on the raw spots, but helped almost immediately. Thank you. Can't have my only help crippling himself on the first day. They worked until the sun started dropping toward the horizon, finally calling it quits when the light got too dim to see properly. They'd replaced maybe a quarter of the fence line. At this rate, it would take weeks to finish the whole thing. Walking back to the house, covered in dirt and sweat, Cole felt more tired than he had in months. But it was a good tired, the kind that came from accomplishment rather than just putting in hours. Ellie was sitting on the porch when they got back, Moses beside her as always. She'd been watching for them, Cole realized, making sure they came back, making sure the stranger didn't do anything to her mother. Smart kid. Wash up, Mara said. Supper in 20 minutes. Cole headed for the well, stripping off his shirt and dumping bucket after bucket of cold water over his head and shoulders. The shock of it felt incredible. He was scrubbing dirt from his arms when he noticed Ellie watching him from the porch. He waved. She didn't wave back, just stared with those unnerving pale eyes. Then she said, loud enough to carry across the yard, "You've got scars." Cole looked down at his torso. Yeah, he had scars, burns across his ribs and shoulder from the fire, a long knife wound across his abdomen from a fight in a mining camp 2 years back, various other marks from various other mistakes. Some, he agreed. How'd you get them? Ellie, Mara called from inside. Leave him alone. I'm just asking. Well, stop asking and set the table. The girl huffed again but went inside. Moses stayed on the porch, still watching Cole with that unblinking stare. What? Cole asked the ram. Moses just kept watching. Supper was stew again, different from yesterday, but just as good. They ate in relative silence, broken only by Ellie's occasional observations about things that had nothing to do with anything. Mrs. Henderson's chickens got out again. Moses helped round them up. That was kind of him, Mara said. He didn't do it to be kind. He did it because they were making a mess. Well, either way, Cole found himself almost smiling. There was something about the easy back and forth between mother and daughter that eased something in his chest. It reminded him of... He shut that thought down hard. After supper, Mara sent Ellie to feed the chickens. Once the girl was gone, she refilled Cole's coffee and sat back down across from him. You're a good worker, she said. Thank you. Better than I expected, honestly. Most men who show up looking for work are running from something. They're not usually worth the food you feed them. Cole's hand tightened around his cup. And you think I'm different? I think you're running from something too, but you actually know how to work, so I don't care as much. The bluntness of it caught him off guard. He'd expected deflection, politeness, the careful dance of conversation between strangers, not this direct assessment. Fair enough, he said. Mara studied him over the rim of her cup. You don't have to tell me what you're running from. It's none of my business. But while you're here, you work hard and you don't bring trouble to my door. That's the deal. That's the deal, Cole agreed. She nodded, seeming satisfied. Then she stood, collecting plates. You'll want to turn in early. Tomorrow we're cutting cedar, and that's harder than post holes. He helped her clean up. She didn't argue this time. Then headed out to the barn. The night air was cool and clean, full of cricket sounds and the distant call of an owl. Stars were starting to come out, more than you could see in town, scattered across the sky like thrown salt. Moses was lying outside the barn door. The ram lifted his head when Cole approached, but didn't move. You sleeping out here now? Cole asked. The ram's ears twitched. That seemed to be answer enough. Inside his small room, Cole lit the lamp and sat on the edge of the bed. His whole body ached in ways he'd almost forgotten. Good ache, honest ache. He pulled off his boots, then reached for his saddlebag. The county notice was still there, folded and waiting. 30 days. Well, 29 now. Cole stared at it for a long moment, then shoved it back into the bag. Tomorrow. He'd figure out what to do tomorrow. He blew out the lamp and lay back, listening to the sounds of the ranch settling in for the night. The creak of wood, the rustle of hay. Moses shifting position outside the door, and from the house, faint but audible, the sound of Mara singing something to Ellie. He couldn't make out the words, but the melody was soft and low and achingly familiar. His wife used to sing like that. Cole turned his face to the wall and tried not to remember. The next 3 days followed the same pattern. Wake before dawn. Work until exhaustion. Eat meals at a table that used to be his but wasn't anymore. Sleep in a room he'd built with his own hands while Moses stood guard outside. They cut cedar by the creek, hauling logs back to the fence line. It was brutal work, the kind that left splinters in your palms and made your shoulders scream. But the wood was good and strong, and the new posts went into the ground solid. Ellie's suspicion didn't ease, but it shifted. She still watched him constantly, still questioned everything he did, but there was less hostility in it now. More curiosity, like she was trying to figure out what category to put him in. On the 4th day, Cole was trimming a post when his knife slipped and opened a gash across his thumb. Blood welled up immediately, dripping onto the wood. "Damn it!" he hissed. Mara was beside him in seconds. "Let me see." "It's fine." "It's not fine. Let me see it." He held out his hand. The cut was deep, but clean. Mara examined it with practiced efficiency, then pulled a handkerchief from her pocket and wrapped it tight. "You'll need stitches," she said. "I've had worse." "I'm sure you have. But infection in your working hand puts you out of commission, and I need that fence finished, so you're getting stitches." There was no arguing with that tone. Cole followed her back to the house, where she made him sit at the table while she gathered supplies. Needle, thread, whiskey. "Drink," she said, handing him the bottle. He took a long swallow. The whiskey burned going down, cheap and sharp. Mara threaded the needle, dipped it in the whiskey, then took his hand. Her fingers were calloused but gentle, holding his palm steady. "This is going to hurt." "I know." The first stitch made him grunt. The second was worse. By the third, he was gripping the edge of the table with his free hand, teeth clenched. "Almost done," Mara said quietly. She worked quickly, efficiently, tying off the stitches and wrapping his thumb in clean cloth. When she finished, she sat back, examining her work. "That should hold. Keep it clean." "Yes, ma'am." Their eyes met. For a moment, something passed between them. Recognition, maybe, of shared experience. She'd done this before. Had patched herself up, patched Ellie up, gotten through injuries and illness without help because there was no help to be had. "Thank you," Cole said. "Don't thank me. Just don't ruin my stitch work by being stupid." A small smile tugged at his mouth. "I'll do my best." That evening, after supper, Ellie brought out a box of carved wooden animals. She set them up on the floor in front of the fire, creating some elaborate scenario Cole couldn't follow. "Moses is the king," she announced. "These sheep are his subjects." "Moses is a ram, not a king," Mara said from her chair, where she was mending one of Ellie's dresses. "He can be both." Cole sat in the other chair, his bandaged hand resting on his knee, watching the girl play. The firelight made everything soft and warm. Outside, the wind had picked up, rattling the shutters. "Do you have any kids?" Ellie asked suddenly, looking up at him. The question hit like a fist to the gut. "Ellie," Mara said sharply. "What?" "I'm just asking." Cole's throat closed up. He couldn't speak, couldn't form words around the sudden thickness in his chest. "That's a rude question," Mara continued. "You don't ask people things like that." "Why not?" "Because it's private." Ellie considered this, then went back to her wooden animals, apparently satisfied. But the damage was done. Cole sat frozen, memories flooding back whether he wanted them or not. A boy's laugh, small hands reaching for him, wide eyes that looked just like his mother's. "Excuse me," he managed, standing abruptly. "I should check on my horse." He was out the door before either of them could respond, gulping night air like a drowning man. His hands shook, his vision blurred. Moses was there, appearing out of the darkness like a ghost. The ram butted gently against Cole's leg, not aggressive, almost comforting. "I'm fine," Cole told the animal. "I'm fine." The ram didn't move, just stood there, solid and warm and present. Cole slid down to sit on the porch steps. Moses settled beside him, close enough that Cole could feel his body heat. They sat like that for a long time, man and ram, both silent. The door opened behind him. Mara's footsteps crossed the porch. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. She doesn't understand that some questions hurt. She's just a kid. Still. Mara sat down on the other side of him, leaving space between them. For what it's worth, you don't have to answer questions you don't want to answer. Not hers, not mine, not anybody's. Cole nodded, not trusting his voice. They sat in silence for a while. The wind moved through the trees. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. "I had a son," Cole heard himself say. "His name was Thomas. He would have been 9 this year." Mara didn't respond, just listened. "There was a fire 5 years ago. He didn't make it out." The words felt strange in his mouth. He hadn't said them out loud in so long, hadn't let himself form the sentences that made it real. "I'm sorry," Mara said softly. "Me too." More silence. Then, "My husband left when I was 6 months pregnant, rode out one morning and never came back. No explanation, no goodbye, just gone." Cole turned to look at her. Mara stared straight ahead, her face expressionless in the dim light from the window. "I thought maybe he'd died," she continued. "That was easier than thinking he'd just left. But then someone saw him 3 towns over with another woman." "So?" She shrugged. "Guess that answered that." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. Turns out I'm better off without him." They fell quiet again. Moses huffed and shifted position, leaning more weight against Cole's side. "That ram really likes you," Mara observed. "Apparently. He hated the last man who tried to work here, chased him clean off the property." "What'd the guy do wrong?" "Kicked one of the chickens. Moses took exception to that." Cole found himself almost smiling. "Seems fair." "I thought so too." Mara stood, brushing dust from her skirt. "I should get Ellie to bed. You coming in?" "In a bit." She nodded and went inside, leaving Cole alone with Moses and the stars. He sat there until the cold drove him back to the barn, thinking about the son he'd lost, and the woman who'd survived alone, and the strange little family that had built a life in the ruins he'd left behind. The 5th day started with rain. Not a gentle spring shower, but a real storm, the kind that turned roads to mud and made working outside impossible. Cole stood in the barn doorway, watching water pour from the sky, and felt antsy. He wasn't good at sitting still, needed to stay busy or his mind went places he didn't want it to go. "Barn roof," he muttered to himself. Mara had mentioned weak spots. This seemed like a good time to check them. He found the ladder and climbed up into the loft, searching for leaks. Found 3 right away, places where water was seeping through, dripping onto the hay below. Not terrible yet, but it would get worse if left alone. He was examining the worst spot when he heard someone climbing the ladder. Ellie's head popped up through the opening. "What are you doing?" she asked. "Checking for leaks. Mama said the roof needs fixing." "She's right." Ellie hauled herself up into the loft and came over to where he was kneeling. She peered at the leak, then up at the roof above it. "How do you fix it?" "Replace the shingles, seal the gaps." "Can you do that?" "If I have the materials." She seemed to think about this. Then, "Why'd your son die?" Cole's hand stilled. He should have expected this, should have known that telling Mara would lead to questions from Ellie. "There was a fire," he said quietly, "in our house. I tried to get him out, but I couldn't reach him in time." "Why not?" "The fire was too big, too hot. I tried, but—" His voice cracked. He stopped, swallowed hard. "I tried." Ellie was quiet for a long moment. Then, "Mama almost died when I was born. She got really sick and the doctor said she probably wouldn't make it, but she did. She's tough. She's the toughest person I know." Ellie sat down cross-legged on the floor. "Do you miss him, your son?" "Every day." "That must hurt a lot." "Yeah. I miss my papa sometimes, even though he left. Is that stupid?" Cole looked at this serious, too wise little girl and felt something crack in his chest. "No, that's not stupid at all. Mama says he wasn't worth missing, but sometimes I wonder what it would be like if he'd stayed." "You'd probably be happy, or maybe you'd fight all the time. Hard to know." "I think we'd fight," Ellie decided. "I'm very argumentative." Despite everything, Cole smiled. "Yeah, I've noticed." They sat together in the loft while rain hammered the roof above them. talking about small things and big things and everything in between. And somewhere in that conversation, Ellie's suspicion finally broke. She started asking about other things, where he'd worked before, what other ranches were like, if he'd ever seen a bear. By the time Mara called them for lunch, something had shifted. Ellie chattered at him over the meal, telling stories about Moses's adventures, asking his opinion on whether chickens were smart or just pretending to be. "They're definitely pretending," Cole said seriously. "That's what I think too." Mara watched this transformation with something like relief in her eyes. That afternoon, the rain stopped. Cole went back to work on the fence, and this time Ellie came with him, Moses trailing behind like always. She helped in small ways, holding wire while he twisted it tight, fetching tools, talking endlessly about everything and nothing. It reminded him so much of Thomas that it hurt. But it was a different kind of hurt. Not the sharp, bleeding wound he'd been carrying. Something gentler, like a bruise that was finally starting to heal. That night, after Ellie was in bed, Cole and Mara sat on the porch drinking coffee. The air smelled clean from the rain and the stars were coming out again. "She likes you now," Mara said. "I noticed. She doesn't like many people. She's particular. That's smart." Mara was quiet for a moment, then, "What you said last night about your son, I told Ellie not to pry, but she asked anyway. I hope you don't mind." "I don't mind." She's trying to understand things. Loss, mostly. Abandonment. Why people leave or die or disappear. Heavy stuff for a kid. She grew up fast. Had to. Mara took a sip of coffee. "Sometimes I wish I could have given her an easier childhood, but this is what we've got." "You're doing right by her. Anyone can see that." "Am I?" "Some days I'm not sure." Cole looked at her. This strong, exhausted woman who'd rebuilt a dead ranch with her bare hands and raised a daughter alone and somehow kept going when most people would have quit. "You're doing fine," he said firmly. "Better than fine." Mara's expression softened. In the dim light, she looked younger, less guarded. "Thank you for that. Just the truth." They fell into comfortable silence, drinking their coffee, listening to the night sounds. And for the first time since he'd arrived, Cole let himself think the dangerous thought that had been building at the edges of his mind. What if he didn't leave? What if he told Mara the truth, all of it, and they figured out a way forward together? The ranch was his legally, but she'd made it hers through blood and sweat and sheer determination. Surely there was some solution that didn't end with her and Ellie being forced out. The county auction was in 3 weeks now, 24 days. He had time to figure this out, time to find the right words, time to... "Mr. Mercer?" He blinked, pulled from his thoughts. "Yeah? You were somewhere else just then." "Sorry, just thinking." "About?" "About the fact that I own this place and haven't told you. About the fire that killed my family. About how being here feels like betraying their memory and honoring it at the same time. About how your daughter laughs like my son used to laugh, and it breaks my heart and puts it back together simultaneously." "Just thinking about the fence," he said instead. "How much more we have to do." Mara nodded, accepting the deflection. "We'll get it done. Always do, somehow." She finished her coffee and stood. "I'm turning in. Don't stay up too late." "Yes, ma'am." She paused at the door. "Cole?" It was the first time she'd used his first name. "Yeah?" "I'm glad you stayed, even with the broken shoe. I'm glad." Before he could respond, she was inside, the door clicking shut behind her. Cole sat there for a long time after, Moses appearing from somewhere to settle at his feet. "I'm in trouble," he told the ram quietly. Moses huffed in what might have been agreement, because the truth was crystallizing in Cole's mind with absolute clarity. He didn't want to leave. Didn't want to go back to drifting from town to town, sleeping in anonymous bunkhouses, working land that meant nothing to anyone. He wanted to stay here. On this ranch that was his, but wasn't. With this woman who'd saved it, and this child who'd claimed it, and this ridiculous ram who'd apparently adopted him. He wanted to stay, and he had no idea how to make that possible without destroying everything they'd built. 24 days. The clock was ticking, and Cole Mercer was running out of time to figure out how to stop running. The locket caught the morning sun like a small beacon, and Cole's world stopped. He'd been helping Ellie carry water to the garden, listening to her explain the complex social hierarchy of the chickens, when she bent down to examine a tomato plant. The movement made the chain around her neck swing forward, and there it was, gold, delicate, unmistakable. His wife's locket, the one he'd given Sarah on their wedding day, the one she'd worn every single day after until the fire took her. Cole's bucket hit the ground, water splashing across his boots. He didn't notice. "Mr. Mercer?" Ellie straightened, frowning at him. "You okay?" He couldn't speak, couldn't breathe. His vision tunneled down to that small gold oval resting against the girl's collarbone. "Where did you get that?" The words came out harsh, sharp. Ellie's hand went to the locket, protective. "It's mine." "Where did you get it?" "I found it. In the garden." "Cole?" Mara's voice came from behind him, alarmed. "What's wrong?" He spun to face her, and whatever she saw in his expression made her take a step back. "That locket, where did it come from?" "I told you I found it," Ellie said, voice rising. "It was in the dirt when we were planting. Mama said I could keep it." "It's just a locket," Mara said carefully, like she was talking to a spooked horse. "Probably been in the ground for years. We find things sometimes when we turn the soil." Things. Like it was nothing. Like it wasn't the last piece of his wife he had left in this world. "That locket belonged to my wife," Cole said, each word feeling like broken glass. "I gave it to her. She was wearing it when she died." The silence that followed was absolute. Ellie's eyes went wide. Her hand stayed on the locket, but now she looked scared. Mara's face had gone pale. "I didn't know," Ellie whispered. "I didn't know it was someone's." Cole forced himself to take a breath, then another. The red haze at the edges of his vision started to clear. He was scaring her, scaring them both. And it wasn't their fault. They hadn't stolen anything. They'd just found something the fire had somehow spared and the earth had eventually returned. "I know you didn't," he managed. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have. I'm sorry." He turned and walked away before either of them could respond, heading for the barn with his heart trying to beat its way out of his chest. Inside his room, he sat on the edge of the bed and put his head in his hands. 5 years. 5 years of trying to outrun the grief, and a small gold locket had dragged it all back in seconds. Sarah's face swam in his memory, the way she'd smiled when he'd clasped that chain around her neck, the way she'd touched it sometimes, absently, like making sure it was still there, the way he'd found it later, in the ashes, scorched but intact. He'd buried it with her. He was sure he'd buried it with her, except apparently he hadn't. Somehow it had stayed in the ground, waiting. And a little girl had found it and claimed it as her own because she had so little that anything beautiful seemed worth keeping. Footsteps approached his door, light ones, not Mara. "Mr. Mercer?" Ellie's voice was small. "Can I come in?" He should say no, should tell her to go away. But instead he heard himself say, "Yeah." She pushed the door open slowly, holding the locket in her palm. Moses stood behind her in the doorway, watchful. "I brought it back," Ellie said. "I don't want it if it makes you sad." Cole looked at the locket, then at the girl's face. She'd been crying. Her eyes were red and her chin wobbled like she was trying hard not to start again. "Come here," he said quietly. She crossed the small room and held out the locket. He took it, the metal warm from her skin, and for a moment he just stared at it. Then he opened it. 2 tiny photographs, faded but visible. On one side, Sarah. On the other, Thomas. Both smiling, both gone. "Is that your family?" Ellie asked softly. "Yeah." "They look nice." They were. He closed the locket, held it for another moment, then did something that surprised even himself. He handed it back to her. "Keep it." Ellie stared at him. "But it's yours." "It was theirs. Now it's yours. The ground gave it to you. Some things belong where they land." "Are you sure?" He wasn't, not even a little bit, but somehow it felt right. Sarah would have liked this girl, her toughness, her fierce loyalty, her stubborn determination, and Thomas would have followed her around like Moses did, probably getting into twice as much trouble. "I'm sure," he said. "Just take care of it." Ellie threw her arms around his neck so suddenly he nearly fell backward. "Thank you," she mumbled into his shoulder. "Thank you, thank you, thank you." Cole's arms came up automatically, holding her. She was solid and warm and alive, and something in his chest that had been clenched tight for 5 years finally loosened. "You're welcome, kid." She pulled back, wiping her eyes. "I'm sorry I made you sad." "You didn't make me sad. The memories did. That's not your fault. Mama says memories are tricky. Sometimes they're good, and sometimes they hurt." "Your mama's a smart woman." Ellie nodded seriously, then headed for the door. Moses moved aside to let her pass, then looked back at Cole with those knowing eyes before following her out. Cole sat alone in the quiet room, feeling wrung out and exhausted, but also lighter somehow, like he'd put down something heavy he'd been carrying without realizing it. The rest of that day passed in a strange haze. He went back to work on the fence, moving through the motions automatically while his mind processed what had happened. Mara worked beside him but didn't push for conversation. Just let him be quiet. Let him work through whatever he needed to work through. It wasn't until that evening, after Ellie had gone to bed, that Mara finally spoke about it. They were on the porch again because apparently that's where the hard conversations happened. The night was cool and clear, stars scattered overhead like shattered ice. "She really didn't know," Mara said quietly. "About the locket. If I'd known it belonged to someone—" "It's fine," Cole interrupted. "Really, she should have it." "That's generous of you." "Not generous, just right, somehow." Mara was quiet for a moment. Then, "You said you used to live around here, that this place looked familiar." Cole's stomach dropped. Here it was, the moment he'd been avoiding. "Yeah. How familiar?" He could still lie, could deflect, change the subject, keep the deception going a little longer, but he was so tired of lying. "Very familiar," he said. "I built this place. The barn, the fence line, the room you sleep in, all of it." Mara went very still beside him. "What?" "This was my ranch, mine and Sarah's. We built it from nothing, raised our son here, and then—" he took a shaky breath. "Then there was a fire. Kitchen fire that spread faster than we could stop it. I got out, they didn't. The fire that killed your family, it happened here." "Yeah." "And you just left?" "I couldn't stay, couldn't look at the place without seeing them, so I walked away. Didn't pay taxes, didn't check on it, just left it to rot." He turned to look at her. "Until I got a county notice saying they were auctioning it off. That's why I came back, not looking for work, looking to see what was left before they sold it." Mara's face had gone carefully blank, the kind of blank that meant she was working hard to control her reaction. "You knew," she said slowly, "from the beginning. You knew this was your property." "Yes. And you didn't say anything." "No." "Why?" Cole ran a hand through his hair, trying to find words for something he barely understood himself. "Because when I got here, I expected ruins, expected ashes and ghosts. Instead, I found life. Found you and Ellie and this place alive again. And I didn't know how to—" "You lied to me," Mara said, her voice flat. "You ate at my table, worked beside me, let my daughter trust you, and you lied." "Yes. Do you have any idea what this place means to me?" She stood abruptly, pacing the length of the porch. "Do you have any concept of what it took to survive here?" "Mara, I was 6 months pregnant and homeless. My husband had left me with nothing. Nothing. And someone told me there was an abandoned ranch out here, that maybe I could squat there until I figured something out." Her voice was shaking now. "The house was half collapsed. The barn was worse, but it had walls and a roof, and it was empty, so I stayed." Cole sat frozen, listening. "That first winter I almost died. Ellie almost died. We had no food, no heat, nothing. I taught myself to hunt, to trap, to fix things I had no business trying to fix. I rebuilt this place with my bare hands while pregnant, then with an infant on my back. Every fence post, every shingle, every planted row, I earned them." "I know. Otawo." "You don't know." She spun to face him. "This isn't just land to me. This is the only thing I've ever truly owned, the only place that's ever been mine. And you—" her voice cracked. "You let me believe it was safe. Let me think I'd finally found somewhere I could stay." "I wasn't going to take it back," Cole said desperately. "I was trying to figure out how to—" "How to what?" How to graciously allow me to keep living on your property? How generous. That's not what I meant. Then what did you mean? Because from where I'm standing, you're a man who abandoned his land, let someone else save it, and now shows up expecting what exactly? I don't expect anything. I just... Cole stood facing her. I came back to bury the past, to see the wreckage and finally accept they were gone. Instead, I found you'd turned hell into something worth living in again. And yeah, I should have told you immediately, but I couldn't make myself destroy that. Couldn't make myself be the reason you and Ellie lost your home. So you decided to lie instead. Yes, I made the wrong choice. I know that. Mara laughed, but there was no humor in it. The auction. When is it? Cole's throat went dry. 3 weeks. 3 weeks, she repeated. So you were going to let me think I was safe for 3 more weeks, and then what? Show up at the courthouse and claim your property? No, I was going to pay the back taxes, stop the auction, figure out a way for you to stay. How charitable. Mara, please. I need you to leave. Her voice had gone cold. Not forever, just tonight. I can't look at you right now. Cole wanted to argue, wanted to make her understand, but the look on her face stopped him. He'd seen that expression before. That's what betrayal looked like. Okay, he said quietly. I'll sleep in the barn. You're already sleeping in the barn. Further away then, the hayloft. She nodded, arms crossed, not looking at him. Cole gathered his things from the small room, moving slowly, giving her time to say something else. She didn't, just stood on the porch like a statue, staring out at the dark land. He climbed up to the hayloft and spread his bedroll in the corner, as far from the house as he could get while still being on the property. Through the loft window he could see the house, could see Mara's shadow moving behind the curtains. Moses appeared at the top of the ladder, which should have been impossible for a ram, but apparently wasn't. The animal settled down beside Cole's bedroll, close enough to touch. She hates me, Cole told him. Moses huffed. Yeah, I deserve it. He lay there in the dark, listening to the night sounds, trying to figure out how everything had gone so wrong so fast. He'd had a plan. Sort of. He was going to tell her the truth, just not yet. Was going to wait until he'd figured out the right words, the right way to explain. But there was no right way to explain that kind of deception. No words that would make it hurt less. The truth was, he'd been a coward, had chosen the easy path, work beside her, earn her trust, let himself feel like part of something again, instead of doing the hard thing immediately. And now she knew exactly who he was. The man who'd built this place and abandoned it. The man who'd owned it legally but never fought for it. The man who'd let her bleed and struggle and nearly die here without ever once checking if anyone needed help. He was the ghost she'd been living with all along. She just hadn't known it until now. Morning came too soon. Cole woke to Moses nudging him with one of those massive horns, which was apparently the ram's version of an alarm clock. I'm awake, he muttered. He climbed down from the loft to find Mara already working, digging in the garden like she was trying to excavate to the center of the earth. She didn't look up when he approached. Mara, the fence won't finish itself. Can we talk? We are talking. You're standing there. I'm telling you to go work on the fence. That's talking. Cole's jaw tightened. I meant about last night. I don't want to talk about last night. She drove the shovel into the ground hard enough to make him wince. I want you to finish the job you started. You owe me that much. I owe you a lot more than that. Yes, you do, but I'll settle for the fence. Finally, she looked up at him. Her eyes were red-rimmed, like maybe she'd been crying, but her jaw was set. After that, we'll talk about what happens next. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was something. A chance, maybe. Okay, Cole said. The fence. He worked alone that day, pushing himself harder than he had any right to. By noon, his shoulders were screaming and his hands were bleeding through the bandages, but he kept going. Penance, maybe. Or just proof that he could finish something he'd started. Ellie appeared around mid-afternoon, Moses at her heels as always. She didn't say anything at first, just watched him work with those serious eyes. Finally, Mama's really mad. I know. She cried last night. I heard her. Cole's hand stilled on the wire he was stringing. I'm sorry. Did you really build this place? Yeah. And you left it? Yeah. Ellie considered this. That was stupid. Despite everything, Cole almost smiled. Yeah, it was. Are you going to take it back? Make us leave? No, never. Then why didn't you just say that from the beginning? Because I'm an idiot. Yeah, you are. She picked up a piece of wire, examining it. Mama says you have to earn trust after you break it, that it doesn't just come back. Your mama's right about a lot of things. She is. Ellie dropped the wire and looked at him directly. I still like you, though. Even if you're an idiot, Moses does too. The ram, lying in the shade nearby, lifted his head like he'd heard his name. He didn't disagree. Thanks, kid. You're welcome. But you better fix this. Mama's sad enough already. She doesn't need more sad. Then she wandered off, Moses trailing behind, leaving Cole alone with the weight of a child's simple wisdom. That evening, he didn't go to the house for supper. Stayed in the barn instead, eating jerky from his saddlebag and drinking water from his canteen. It felt wrong, being this close to a real meal and not sharing it, but he didn't want to push. Around sunset, footsteps approached the barn. Mara appeared in the doorway, holding a plate covered with a cloth. You need to eat real food, she said, setting it on the workbench. Can't finish the fence if you're half starved. Thank you. She turned to leave, then stopped. Why didn't you just tell me who you were when you first arrived? Cole set down the piece of harness he'd been mending. This was it. The real question. The one that mattered. Honestly, I don't know. Maybe because I'd spent 5 years running from this place, and admitting I was back felt like admitting I'd failed. Maybe because seeing it alive again broke something open in me and I needed time to understand what that meant. He met her eyes. Or maybe because the moment you invited me in and fed me, I stopped being the owner and started being just another person you were kind to, and that felt better than anything had felt in years. Mara's expression softened slightly. Just slightly. I spent 3 years believing this place was mine, she said quietly. 3 years fighting for it, bleeding for it, making it home. And now I find out I was living in someone else's house the whole time. Do you understand how that feels? No, but I can imagine. Can you? Can you really imagine what it's like to have nothing, build something from that nothing, and then discover it was never really yours to begin with? You're right, Cole said. I can't. I've lost things, but I've never had to build from nothing the way you did. Never had to survive the way you have. She nodded slowly, some of the anger draining out of her posture. I'm not ready to forgive you yet. Maybe I won't ever be. But I need to know. What happens after the fence is done? After the 3 weeks are up? What then? This was the moment, the one he'd been avoiding since he got here. Cole took a breath and spoke the truth he'd been too scared to voice out loud. I'm going to pay the back taxes, stop the auction, and then I'm going to sign this place over to you. Legally. So it's yours free and clear, no questions, no conditions. Mara stared at him. What? You saved this land. You brought it back to life. It's yours more than it's mine. Always has been. You can't just... That's not... She seemed genuinely shaken. That's a ranch, land. You can't just give that away. Why not? It's mine to give. Because people don't do that. Well, I'm doing it, or I will, once we get the paperwork sorted out. Mara sat down hard on a hay bale, like her legs had stopped working. I don't understand. Why would you do that? Cole moved closer, careful not to crowd her. Because you've earned it. Because Ellie deserves a home that can't be taken away. And because this place needs someone who'll fight for it, and that's not me. That's you. But where will you go? The question hit him harder than it should have. He hadn't let himself think that far ahead. I don't know, he admitted. Wherever the work is, I guess. Like always. That's it? You just wander off again? Seems like the best option for everyone. Mara was quiet for a long time, staring at her hands. When she finally spoke, her voice was soft. You're still an idiot. Yeah. And a coward for not telling me the truth from the start. Yeah. And if you think signing over some papers makes up for lying to me, you're wrong. I know. She looked up at him, and something in her expression had changed. Still hurt, still angry, but also something else. Something that might have been understanding. But it's a start, she said quietly. It's a start. They sat in the barn as darkness fell around them, not talking, just existing in the same space. It wasn't comfortable, wasn't easy, but it was real. And after so much deception, Real was something. Eventually, Mara stood. There's stew left if you want more. And you can sleep in your room again. The actual room, not the hayloft. You sure? No, but Ellie asked where you were at supper, and I don't explain why you're sleeping in the hay like some kind of criminal. Thank you. Don't thank me yet. We've still got a lot to work through. She left him there, and Cole sat alone in the quiet barn, feeling like maybe, just maybe, he hadn't completely destroyed everything. The next few days were strange. They worked together on the fence, but the easy rhythm they'd found before was gone. Conversations were stilted, careful. Mara kept him at arm's length, and Cole let her, understanding he'd lost the right to closeness. But slowly, incrementally, things shifted. Mara asked his opinion on where to plant corn. He helped Ellie build a new chicken coop, and she chattered at him like nothing had changed. Moses continued his self-appointed role as Cole's shadow, which apparently counted for something in Mara's eyes. And one evening, nearly a week after the truth had come out, Mara appeared at the barn with 2 cups of coffee. Want company? She asked. Always. She sat beside him on the bench outside the barn door, handing him one of the cups. They drank in silence, watching the sun set over the western hills. I've been thinking, Mara said finally, about what you said, about signing the ranch over. You don't have to decide anything yet. I'm not taking it. Cole turned to stare at her. What? I'm not taking the ranch. Not like that. Mara, you've earned... I know what I've earned, and I know what you're trying to do. But I'm not taking your land out of guilt. She met his eyes. If this place is going to be mine, it's going to be because we figured out a way to make it work. Together. Not because you're trying to ease your conscience. I don't understand. You built this place. Your family's buried here, even if there aren't markers. And like it or not, this land is part of your story. She paused. So here's what I'm thinking. You stop the auction. We figure out the tax situation. And then we work out some kind of partnership. This place belongs to both of us. You put in the years building it, I put in the years saving it. Seems like that makes us even. Cole's throat tightened. You'd do that? After everything? I'm still mad at you, might stay mad for a while, but Moses likes you, Ellie likes you, and... She stopped, took a breath. And I think maybe this place works better with someone else here. Someone who knows how to fix things when they break. Someone who understands what it took to build it in the first place. You want me to stay? I'm saying it's an option, if you want it. Cole looked out at the ranch, the house with smoke rising from the chimney, the garden stretching toward the creek, the fence line they'd rebuilt together, his land and her land, and somehow, impossibly, their land. Yeah, he said roughly. Yeah, I want it. Mara nodded, something like relief crossing her face. Okay then, partners. Partners. They shook on it, formal and serious, and then Mara did something completely unexpected. She smiled. A real smile. Not the careful half versions she'd been giving him since the truth came out. Now finish your coffee, she said, and then come inside. Ellie's been practicing a song she wants to sing for you, and if we make her wait much longer, she's going to explode. Cole followed her back to the house, Moses trailing behind them both, and for the first time since he'd arrived, he walked through that door without carrying the weight of lies. The truth was out, messy and painful and complicated, but out. And somehow, impossibly, they were going to make this work. The song Ellie sang was off-key and meandering, something about a horse who wanted to be a cloud, and Cole had never heard anything better in his life. He sat at the kitchen table, coffee going cold in his hands, and watched this fierce little girl perform like she was on a stage in front of hundreds, instead of just him and her mother and a ram who'd somehow squeezed himself partway through the door. When she finished, she took a dramatic bow. Cole applauded, and Mara did too, shaking her head with a smile that said she'd heard this song about 50 times already. That was something, Cole said. Did you like the part where the horse grows wings? That was my favorite part. Mine too, Ellie beamed. I'm writing a second verse where he meets a dragon. Can't wait to hear it. Things felt different after that night. Not perfect. There was still tension, still moments when Mara would look at him and he could see the hurt lurking behind her eyes. But the sharp edges had dulled. They were finding their way towards something that might eventually look like trust again. The fence got finished 2 days later. Cole drove the last post into the ground, while Mara strung the final section of wire, and they both stepped back to admire their work. It wasn't pretty, new posts mixed with salvaged ones, wire patched in places, but it was solid. It would hold. "That'll do," Mara said. "Yeah, that'll do." They walked the full perimeter that afternoon, checking every connection, making sure nothing had been missed. Ellie and Moses trailed behind them, the girl chattering about where they should plant pumpkins this year and whether chickens could be trained to do tricks. "No," Mara said. "Chickens cannot be trained." "Moses could train them." "Moses can barely train himself." The ram huffed indignantly, which only made Ellie laugh. Cole found himself smiling as he listened to them. This was what the ranch had been missing before. Not just people, but life. Joy. The sound of a child's laughter mixing with the wind. Sarah would have loved this. Would have loved Mara's quiet strength and Ellie's wild imagination. Would have probably spent hours in the garden with them, teaching Ellie the names of plants and showing her how to coax vegetables from stubborn soil. The thought didn't hurt the way it used to. It was bittersweet, yes, but not the sharp agony that had defined his grief for 5 years. More like an old scar that ached when the weather changed. Present, but bearable. That evening, Cole rode into town. He'd been putting it off, but the auction was in 12 days and he needed to settle things with the county before it was too late. The clerk's office was closing when he arrived, but the same exhausted-looking man who'd delivered the notice was still there, sorting papers like they'd personally wronged him. "Help you?" he asked without looking up. "I'm here about a property auction, the Mercer Ranch." That got his attention. The clerk looked up, adjusting his spectacles. "You interested in bidding?" "I'm the owner, Cole Mercer. I'm here to pay the back taxes." The clerk blinked. "The owner? We sent notices for 2 years. Figured you were dead or didn't care." "Bit of both," Cole said. "How much do I owe?" The clerk pulled out a ledger, running his finger down columns of numbers. 5 years of back taxes, plus penalties and fees. He did some calculation on a separate piece of paper. "Comes to $240. Cole's stomach dropped. He had maybe $60 to his name, $70 if he sold his saddle, which he couldn't do because then he'd have no way to work. "Can I pay in installments?" he asked, already knowing the answer. "Auction's in 12 days, you pay in full before then, or the property gets sold. Those are the rules." "Right, the rules." Cole stared at the number on the paper, trying to figure out how he could possibly come up with that much money in less than 2 weeks. "If I put down what I have now, does that buy me more time?" "Nope, all or nothing." Cole nodded slowly, his mind racing. He could try to get a loan, but no bank would give money to a man with no collateral and no steady income. He could try to sell something, but he owned nothing of value except the horse, and selling that would defeat the whole purpose. "I'll get you the money," he said, more to himself than the clerk. "You better make it soon. Day of the auction, we start at 9 sharp. Cole left the office feeling like he'd been punched in the gut. $240. Might as well be $2,000 for all the chance he had of getting it. The ride back to the ranch was long and dark, giving him too much time to think. He could tell Mara the truth, that he couldn't afford to stop the auction. But then what? They'd lose the place anyway. She'd lose it, after everything she'd done to keep it alive. There had to be a way. Had to be something he could do. By the time he reached the ranch, it was late. The house was dark, except for a single lamp burning in the kitchen window. Mara's way of leaving a light on for him, he realized. Like she'd been doing since he arrived, even before she knew who he was. He was unsaddling his horse when he heard footsteps. Mara appeared from the darkness, wrapped in a shawl against the night chill. "How'd it go?" she asked. Cole focused on the buckles, not trusting himself to look at her. $240, due before the auction. Silence. Then, "How much do you have?" "Not enough." "How much, Cole?" 60. Maybe 70 if I can find someone to buy my spare boots. More silence. He could feel her staring at him. "So we're going to lose it anyway," she said finally, her voice flat. "No. I'll figure something out." "How? You going to magic money out of thin air?" "I don't know yet, but I'll—" "Stop." She held up a hand. "Just stop. Don't make promises you can't keep." "Mara, I need to think." She turned and walked back toward the house, her shoulders rigid. "Just let me think." He watched her go, feeling helpless and useless and angry at himself for ever thinking he could fix this. He'd come back too late with too little, and now they were all going to pay for it. Moses appeared from somewhere, settling down outside the barn. The ram looked at Cole with what might have been sympathy or might have been judgment. Hard to tell with Moses. "Don't suppose you've got $200 hidden somewhere?" Cole asked. Moses huffed and closed his eyes. "Yeah, that's what I thought." The next morning, Cole was up before dawn, desperate for something to do with his hands. He started repairing the barn roof, hammering shingles with more force than necessary, trying to work out the frustration building in his chest. He was so focused on the work that he didn't hear the rider approach until Moses started making noise, a low, warning sound Cole had never heard from him before. He looked down from the roof to see a man on horseback stopping in the yard. Tall, lean, with the look of someone who'd spent more time in saloons than doing honest work. His clothes were dusty and his eyes were mean. Mara came out of the house, Ellie behind her. The moment Mara saw the man, her whole body went rigid. "Vernon," she said, and there was something in her voice Cole had never heard before. Fear, maybe, or barely controlled rage. Mara. The man, Vernon, dismounted with exaggerated slowness. "Been a while." "Not long enough." "That any way to greet family?" Cole climbed down from the roof, moving carefully. Moses had positioned himself between Vernon and the porch, head lowered, and the ram's whole posture screamed danger. "What do you want?" Mara asked. Vernon's smile showed too many teeth. "Heard some interesting news in town. Heard this place is going up for auction. That true?" "None of your business." "See, I think it is my business. On account of you squatting on property you don't own, raising a child in a house that's not yours." His eyes slid to Ellie, and Cole's hands clenched into fists. "Makes a man wonder about custody. What kind of mother drags her kid around to illegal living situations?" "You don't have any rights to her," Mara said, her voice shaking. "You're not her father. You're nothing to her. I'm blood. Her uncle, whether you like it or not. And blood means something when it comes to the law." Cole stepped forward. "I think you should leave." Vernon's attention swung to him, eyes narrowing. "And who the hell are you? Someone telling you to get off this property? Your property? Or are you just another drifter warming her bed?" Vernon's smile widened. No judgment. Mara always did have a soft spot for strays. Cole was moving before he could think, but Mara's voice stopped him. "Don't." She stepped between them, facing Vernon. "Say what you came to say and then leave." Vernon pulled out a piece of paper from his jacket, waving it lazily. "Just wanted you to know I'm planning to attend that auction. Figured I'd bid on the place myself. And once I own it, well..." He shrugged. "We'll see about those custody arrangements." "You don't have money for an auction," Mara said, but her voice wavered. "Don't I? Been saving up, working steady. Might surprise you what I can afford." He tucked the paper back into his jacket. "Of course, if you could scrape together enough to stop the auction yourself, wouldn't be an issue. But I'm guessing you can't. Which means in 12 days, this place gets sold, you get evicted, and then we'll see how well you can take care of that little girl with no home and no prospects." Ellie made a small sound behind her mother, and Cole saw red. "You threaten them again," he said quietly, "and you'll regret it." Vernon laughed. "That a fact? You going to stop me, Drifter? You and that demon sheep?" Moses chose that moment to charge. The ram hit Vernon in the side hard enough to knock him off his feet. He went down in the dust, cursing, and Moses stood over him, head lowered, making that same dangerous sound from before. "Get him off me!" Vernon shouted. "Moses," Mara said calmly, "that's enough." The ram backed off slowly, still watching Vernon like he was considering round two. Vernon scrambled to his feet, face red with rage and humiliation. "You're all crazy. That animal's dangerous." "Only to people who deserve it," Cole said. "Now get on your horse and leave." Vernon mounted, jerking his horse's reins harder than necessary. 12 days, Mara, then we'll see who's laughing." He rode off, kicking his horse into a gallop, and they all stood there in the settling dust. Ellie spoke first. "Is he really going to take me away?" Mara turned and pulled her daughter into a fierce hug. "No, no, baby, he's not. I promise." But over Ellie's head, her eyes met Cole's, and he saw the terror there. She didn't believe her own words. That night, After Ellie was in bed, Mara and Cole sat on the porch in heavy silence. The air felt thick, oppressive, like a storm building. "Vernon's my ex-husband's brother," Mara said finally. "He showed up about a year ago claiming he wanted to help, wanted to look after family, but really he just wanted money. When I didn't have any to give him, he started threatening to take Ellie, said blood relatives have rights, that a woman alone can't provide properly." "Can he actually do that?" "I don't know. Maybe. If I'm homeless, if the court thinks I can't provide..." Her voice broke. "I can't lose her, Cole. She's everything." Cole's mind was racing. 12 days, $240, and now Vernon, circling like a vulture, waiting for them to fail. "How much money do you have?" he asked. $40. I've been saving for winter supplies. So together we have about 100, maybe 110 if we sell everything that's not nailed down. That's not enough. No, it's not. They sat in the darkness, both doing the same math, coming to the same impossible conclusion. "I could go to the Hendersons," Mara said quietly. "Ask for a loan. They've helped before." "How much could they lend?" "I don't know. Maybe $50? They're not wealthy, and I already owe them for help during last year's harvest." Cole ran the numbers again. 160 if they were lucky. Still $80 short. "What if we both worked in town?" he suggested. "Found jobs for the next 12 days, saved every penny?" Who'd watch Ellie? Who'd tend the animals? And no job pays enough in 12 days to make up that difference. She was right. He knew she was right, but there had to be something. "What about selling cattle?" he tried. "I only have 6 head. Even if I sold them all, it wouldn't be enough. And then we'd have no stock to rebuild with." They fell silent again, the weight of their situation pressing down like a physical thing. "I'm sorry," Cole said. "I should have come back sooner. Should have dealt with this years ago instead of running away. Stop apologizing and help me think." So they thought. Threw out ideas, shot them down, tried again. Considered borrowing from every neighbor within 20 miles, selling everything from furniture to tools to the horse. Nothing added up to enough. Finally, exhausted and defeated, Mara stood. "I need to sleep. Maybe something will come to me in the morning." "Mara." She stopped, not looking at him. "We'll figure this out," he said. "I swear to you, I won't let Vernon take this place. Won't let him take Ellie." "Don't make promises you can't keep," she said, echoing her words from the night before. Then she went inside, closing the door quietly behind her. Cole sat alone on the porch, staring out at the dark land. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote howled. Moses appeared from the barn and settled at his feet, warm and solid. "I don't know what to do," Cole told the ram. "I don't know how to fix this." Moses didn't have an answer. Nobody did. The next few days passed in a blur of desperation. Cole rode to the Henderson place and came back with a promised loan of $40. Mara sold 2 of the cattle to a rancher passing through, getting less than they were worth but taking what she could get. They scraped together another 20 by selling tools, spare tack, anything they could live without. It still wasn't enough. With 5 days left before the auction, they had $190, $50 short. And no matter how they calculated, how they schemed, how they pleaded with the universe, they couldn't find those last $50. Vernon rode by twice more, never stopping, just sitting on his horse at the property line, watching, making sure they knew he was still there, still waiting. "I could kill him," Cole said after the second time. "That won't help. It would make me feel better." Mara almost smiled. Almost. Ellie had gotten quiet. She'd figured out something was wrong, even if she didn't understand the details. She stuck closer to Mara, watched Vernon's visits with fearful eyes, and spent more time than usual with Moses, burying her face in the ram's wool like he could protect her from everything bad in the world. Cole couldn't stand it, couldn't stand watching this child lose the only real home she'd ever known. Couldn't stand seeing Mara slowly crumble under the weight of impending disaster. There had to be something. Had to be. On the 4th day before the auction, Cole was in the barn taking inventory of what little they had left to sell when Ellie appeared. "Mr. Mercer?" He looked down at her. She was holding something in her hands, clutched tight against her chest. "Yeah, kid? I want to help." "You are helping. You've been so good through all this." "No, I mean really help." She held out her hands, and Cole saw what she'd been holding. Sarah's locket. His throat closed up. Ellie? It's gold, right? Gold is valuable. We could sell it. No, absolutely not. But that locket is yours. I gave it to you. We're not selling it. But if it helps, Mama. No. Cole knelt down to her level. Listen to me. Your mama would never forgive herself if you sold that locket. Neither would I. We'll figure something else out. But what if there isn't something else? The question hung in the air between them, unanswerable. Cole pulled her into a hug, this fierce little girl who was willing to give up the one beautiful thing she owned to save her home. We'll find a way, he said, wishing he believed it. That night, Vernon came back. But this time, he didn't just watch from the property line. This time, he rode right into the yard, stumbling drunk off his horse, yelling for Mara. Cole was out of the barn in seconds. Mara was on the porch, and Moses appeared from nowhere, already positioned between Vernon and the house. Vernon, leave, Mara said. You're drunk. Damn right I'm drunk. Celebrating. He swayed, grinning. 4 more days, Mara. 4 more days and this place is mine, and once it's mine, that little girl is mine too. Going to teach her proper, not let her run wild with demons and drifters. You're not taking her anywhere, Mara said, her voice steel. You can't stop me. Law's on my side. Blood's on my side. Vernon took a step toward the porch. And once you're homeless and desperate, maybe you'll finally appreciate what I've been offering all along. Cole moved forward, fists clenched. Get off this property. Last warning. Vernon's eyes swung to him, focusing with difficulty. Or what? You'll hit me? Go ahead. Assault and battery. That'll look real good when it comes to custody hearings. He was right. Hitting him would only make things worse. But Cole didn't need to hit him. Moses, he said quietly. The ram charged. Vernon went down hard, and this time Moses didn't back off when told. Just stood over him, one hoof on the man's chest, making that deep, threatening sound. Get him off! Vernon screamed. Cole walked over slowly, standing above him. You listen to me very carefully. This ranch belongs to me, legally. My name on the deed, my taxes to pay. And as the legal owner, I'm telling you that you are never welcome here again. You come back, I'll have you arrested for trespassing. Vernon's eyes widened. You're lying. Am I? Want to test that theory in 4 days when I show up at the courthouse with proof of ownership? You don't have the money to stop the auction, don't I? Cole leaned down. You've been so busy watching Mara, you never thought to check on me, never thought maybe I had resources you didn't know about. It was a complete bluff. He had no resources. But Vernon, drunk and scared and pinned under a ram, didn't know that. And while we're on the subject of custody, Cole continued, let me make something else clear. Mara is my wife, has been for weeks now. We just hadn't made it official because we didn't think it was anyone's business. But now I think we'll make it very official, which means Ellie's under my protection too. And I promise you, if you ever threaten this family again, you won't like what happens next. Vernon's face had gone pale. You're bluffing. Try me. They stared at each other for a long moment. Then Cole nodded to Moses. Let him up. The ram backed off. Vernon scrambled to his feet, backing toward his horse. You're both crazy, he muttered. Crazy and doomed. Maybe, but we're crazy together. Now get out! Vernon mounted his horse and rode off into the darkness, and Cole stood there, heart pounding, wondering what the hell he'd just done. He turned to find Mara staring at him from the porch, eyes wide. Your wife? She said. I was improvising. That's one hell of an improvisation. It worked, didn't it? He's gone. For now. But in 4 days, I'll figure something out. Mara came down the steps, stopping in front of him. You said you owned the ranch, that it was legally yours. It is, but you don't have the money to keep it. Not yet. Cole. She put her hand on his arm. What are you planning? The truth was, he didn't know. He'd been running on adrenaline and rage and desperation, saying whatever it took to get Vernon to leave. Now, standing in the quiet yard with Mara looking at him like he might actually have answers, he felt the weight of every impossible promise he'd just made. I don't know, and he admitted. But I meant what I said. About protecting you and Ellie. About this being our home, our family. Mara's eyes searched his face. You said I was your wife. I said a lot of things, but you meant that one, didn't you? Cole's breath caught. They'd been dancing around this for weeks. The way she smiled when he came in for meals, the way he found excuses to be near her, the way they'd built something together that looked an awful lot like partnership and felt like something more. Yeah, he said quietly. I meant that one. Mara was silent for a long moment. Then she said, the county clerk in town. He can do marriages, right? Officiate them? I think so. Why? Because if we're going to claim we're married to protect Ellie, we should probably actually be married. Make it legal. She paused. And because I think maybe I want to be. Married to you, if you want that too. Cole stared at her, trying to process what she was saying. You hate me for lying to you. I hated you for lying. Past tense. I've had time to think about it, and I understand why you did. Doesn't mean it was right, but I understand. She stepped closer. And I've watched you these past weeks. Watched you work until your hands bled. Watched you give Ellie your wife's locket without hesitation. Watched you stand up to Vernon when you had every reason to walk away from this mess. You're not the man who ran from this ranch 5 years ago. You're someone different now. Someone better? Someone who stays. The words hit him square in the chest. Someone who stays. That's all Mara had ever wanted. Someone who wouldn't abandon her when things got hard. I'm staying, he said. Whatever happens with the auction, whatever happens with Vernon, I'm staying. With you and Ellie and that crazy ram. I'm done running. Mara smiled then, really smiled, and Cole felt something shift inside him. Something that had been broken for 5 years clicking back into place. Okay then, she said. Let's get married. Now? Tomorrow. First thing. Before I lose my nerve and before Vernon sobers up enough to cause more trouble. Mara, I still don't have the money for the taxes. I know, and maybe we'll lose the ranch anyway, but at least Ellie will have protection. Legal protection from Vernon. That's worth something. She was right. And honestly, the thought of being married to Mara, of making this partnership official, of having the right to call her his, that was worth something too. Worth a lot, actually. Tomorrow then, he agreed. She nodded, started to turn away, then stopped. Cole? Yeah? When you told Vernon you'd figure out the money, did you mean that? Or were you just trying to scare him? Cole thought about lying, about giving her false hope, but he'd done enough lying. I don't know how yet, he said honestly, but I'll die trying. Mara's expression softened. Don't die. Just try. She went inside, leaving Cole alone in the yard with Moses and the stars and the impossible weight of promises he didn't know how to keep. 4 days until the auction. 4 days to find $50 that might as well be $50,000. 4 days to figure out how to save everything that mattered. Moses nudged his hand and Cole scratched the ram's ears absently. I really hope you've got a plan, he told the animal, because I'm fresh out of ideas. Moses, as usual, had no answers. But tomorrow morning, Cole would marry Mara Whitlock, would stand up in front of whatever witnesses they could find and promise to love and protect her for the rest of his life. And then, somehow, he'd figure out how to keep that promise. Even if it meant selling everything he owned, begging every person in 3 counties, or making a deal with the devil himself. This family was his now, and he'd be damned if he'd let anyone take it away. They rode into town at dawn, all 3 of them on Cole's horse, with Moses trotting alongside like some kind of deranged wedding procession. Ellie sat in front, chattering excitedly about whether she'd get to be a witness, while Mara rode behind Cole, her arms wrapped around his waist in a way that made his heart do strange things. You're really sure about this? He asked over his shoulder. I've made worse decisions, Mara said. They'll give me a few hours and I might remember what they were. That's reassuring. You want reassuring? You should have proposed properly. Maybe got down on one knee. We're riding a horse. Excuses. Despite everything, despite the looming auction and the missing money and Vernon's threats, Cole found himself smiling. This was insane. They were getting married to spite a drunk and protect a child, and maybe, just maybe, because something real had grown between them in the ruins of his old life. The county clerk looked at them like they'd lost their minds when they walked into his office before 8 in the morning. You want to get married? Right now? That a problem? Cole asked. I need coffee before I deal with this level of chaos. The clerk shuffled papers around his desk. You got a license? Can we get one here? You can. Costs $2. Then there's a 3-day waiting period. Cole's stomach sank. We don't have 3 days. That's what everyone says. The law says otherwise. Mara stepped forward. Sir, I have a man threatening to take my daughter from me. This marriage gives her legal protection. Please. We'll pay extra if we have to. The clerk studied her face, then Ellie's, then sighed like they were personally responsible for all his problems. There's an emergency waiver, but I need proof of the emergency. Would a drunk threatening custody count? Cole asked. Depends. He actually filed papers. Not yet, but he's been making threats for a year. Any witnesses? Half the town's probably heard him at the saloon, Mara said. The clerk pinched the bridge of his nose. Fine, I'll process the waiver, but if this comes back to bite me, I'm blaming you both. He pulled out forms, started filling them in. Names? They gave their information while Ellie explored the office, touching everything within reach until Mara told her to stop. Moses had been left outside, but Cole could see him through the window, standing guard by the hitching post. Previous marriages? The clerk asked. Widowed, Cole said. Divorced, Mara said at the same time. The clerk looked up. This is starting to feel like a story I don't want to hear. Probably not, Cole agreed. 20 minutes later, they were married. The clerk performed a ceremony so perfunctory it barely qualified as words, pronounced them husband and wife with all the enthusiasm of a man reading a grocery list, and handed them a certificate that made it official. Congratulations, he said, sounding like he meant the opposite. Try not to regret this before noon. Outside, Ellie immediately wanted to know if this meant Cole was her father now. Stepfather, Mara corrected. But yes, legally, he's family now. Ellie processed this, then threw her arms around Cole's waist. Does this mean Moses is family too? Moses was always family, Cole said. He just didn't have the paperwork. They rode back to the ranch in higher spirits than they had any right to have. The money problem hadn't magically solved itself, but at least Ellie had protection now. At least Vernon couldn't claim blood rights over a child who had a legal father standing in his way. It wasn't everything, but it was something. Back at the ranch, reality settled in fast. 3 days until the auction. $190 saved, $50 short. Cole spent that afternoon writing to every neighbor within 10 miles, asking about work, about loans, about anything that might generate quick cash. Most people were sympathetic but poor themselves. The few who had money to lend had already contributed what they could. By evening, he'd gained exactly nothing except sore muscles and growing desperation. He was unsaddling his horse when he heard wagon wheels, turned to see Henderson's oldest boy driving up with a wagon bed full of furniture. "What's this?" Cole asked. The boy hopped down, looking uncomfortable. "Pa heard you were still short on money. Sent me to collect things to sell in town. Said whatever you can spare, he'll take to the auction house and try to get a fair price." Cole looked at the wagon, then back at the house. Mara was standing on the porch, arms crossed, face carefully neutral. "How much do you think you can get?" he called to her. "Maybe $20 if we're lucky. 30 if the buyer's generous. Still not enough, but closer." They spent the next hour loading furniture, the table that wasn't Cole's original but had served Mara well, chairs that didn't match, a dresser Mara had salvaged from somewhere and repaired herself. Each piece felt like a small betrayal, selling off the home they'd built. Ellie watched from the porch, holding Moses's wool. She didn't say anything, but her eyes were too bright. When the wagon finally rolled away, the house felt empty, barren, like they were already preparing to abandon it. "We'll get new furniture," Cole said, not believing it. "Once this is settled." "Sure," Mara said. "We'll have a furniture party. Invite all our furniture friends." "That doesn't make sense." "Neither does any of this." She went inside, and Cole stood in the yard feeling like he'd failed at everything that mattered. He'd come back to bury the past, and instead had built a future that was about to collapse around him. That night, they ate dinner sitting on the floor because they'd sold the table. Ellie thought it was an adventure, made a game of it, pretending they were pioneers camping under the stars, even though they were inside with a roof over their heads. "Tomorrow we should sell the roof," she announced. "Then we really would be under the stars." "We're not selling the roof," Mara said. "Why not? We've sold everything else." She had a point. After Ellie went to bed, Cole and Mara sat on the porch. It had become their ritual, these quiet conversations in the dark, the place where hard truths got spoken. Henderson's boy came back while you were putting Ellie down, Mara said. They got $25 for the furniture, better than expected. Cole did the math. 215 total, still 25 short. Yeah. They sat in silence, both doing calculations that never added up right. I've been thinking, Mara said finally, about what happens if we lose the ranch. We're not... Cole, we need to talk about it. We need a plan for if this doesn't work. He didn't want to have this conversation, didn't want to acknowledge the possibility of failure. But she was right. They needed to be realistic. What are you thinking? He asked. There's a town about 50 miles west, growing place, lots of work. We could go there, start over. She paused. It wouldn't be home, but we'd be together. That counts for something. That counts for everything, Cole said. But we're not giving up yet. I know, I'm just saying we have options. We'll survive this one way or another. Cole reached for her hand, lacing his fingers through hers. I'm sorry I couldn't fix this. I should have come back sooner, should have dealt with the taxes before it got this bad. Stop apologizing for the past. All we've got is now. Then I'm sorry for now. For not being able to magic money out of thin air like you deserve. Mara squeezed his hand. You married me this morning to protect my daughter from a drunk. You stood up to Vernon when you could have walked away. You gave Ellie your wife's locket without hesitation. You've got nothing to apologize for. I'm still $25 short of keeping our home. Our home, Mara repeated. You hear that? Somewhere in the last few weeks, it stopped being my place or your place and became ours. That's not nothing. She was right, but it didn't make the math work any better. The next day passed in agonizing slowness. Cole worked around the ranch, fixing small things that didn't matter, just needing to keep his hands busy. Mara baked bread they couldn't afford flour for, using the last of their supplies because sitting idle made her crazy. Ellie was quieter than usual. She'd figured out that something bad was coming, even if she didn't understand the details. Spent the day following Moses around, talking to him in low voices about things Cole couldn't hear. That evening, as the sun was setting, a rider appeared on the horizon. Cole's hand went to his knife, expecting Vernon. But as the rider got closer, he recognized the horse. Henderson. The older man dismounted slowly, like his bones hurt. He'd been their neighbor for 20 years, back when Cole had first built this place. Good man, steady. Henderson, Cole greeted him. What brings you out? Heard you got married. Thought I'd come by and congratulate you proper. Henderson's eyes were kind. Also heard you're still short on the taxes. Word travels fast. Small county. People talk. Henderson reached into his jacket and pulled out a small leather pouch. My wife wanted you to have this. It's not much, but it might help. Cole opened the pouch. Inside were bills and coins totaling maybe $15. His throat closed up. Henderson, I can't. You can and you will. Your wife helped birth our youngest when the midwife couldn't make it through the storm. Saved the baby's life. Probably saved my wife's, too. We never properly thanked her for that. Cole looked at Mara. She'd gone pale. I didn't do anything special, she said. Anyone would have... But they didn't. You did. And now we're returning the favor. Henderson tipped his hat. You two are good people. This county needs more of that. Hope this helps. He left before they could argue further, riding off into the gathering dusk. Cole stared at the money in his hands. $15. They had $230 now, $10 short. So close. They were so damn close. We're going to make it, Mara said, but her voice shook. We have to. That night, Cole couldn't sleep. He lay in bed, the bed they'd kept because selling the only place to sleep seemed like a bridge too far, and listened to Mara's breathing beside him. They'd agreed she'd stay in the house, keep things proper for Ellie's sake, but she'd fallen asleep on the porch and Cole had carried her to bed. $10, 10 measly dollars stood between them and safety. He thought about Vernon, probably drinking himself stupid in town, counting down the hours until he could swoop in and claim the ranch. Thought about Ellie losing the only home she'd ever known. Thought about Mara's face when she'd talked about starting over in a town 50 miles away. They'd survive. Mara was right about that. They were tough, all three of them. They'd figure something out. But this place, this ranch that had been born in love, abandoned in grief, and resurrected through sheer determination, it deserved better than to fall to a man like Vernon. Cole got up, moving quietly so he wouldn't wake Mara. went out to the barn where Moses was already awake, like the ram had been waiting for him. I don't know what to do, Cole told him. I've tried everything, asked everyone, sold everything, and we're still $10 short. Moses just looked at him with those knowing eyes. You don't have any secret ram savings, do you? The ram huffed, which Cole chose to interpret as no. He sat down in the dirt, back against the barn wall, and let himself feel the full weight of impending failure. Tomorrow was the auction. In less than 12 hours, they'd have to show up with money they didn't have or watch everything slip away. The eastern sky was just starting to lighten when he heard footsteps. Ellie appeared, wrapped in a blanket, Moses immediately moving to her side. Can't sleep? Cole asked. She shook her head, sitting down beside him. Are we going to lose the ranch? There was no point lying to her. I don't know, kid. We're trying real hard not to. Because of money? Yeah. How much do we need? $10. Ellie was quiet for a moment, then, that's not very much. It is when you don't have it. She leaned against his shoulder, and Cole wrapped his arm around her. They sat like that, watching the sun come up on what might be their last day on this land. Mr. Mercer? Ellie's voice was small. You can call me Cole now, or whatever you want to call me. Can I call you Pa? Cole's chest tightened. Yeah, you can call me that. Okay, Pa. Yeah? We're going to be okay. Even if we have to leave, we'll be okay because we're together. Sometimes kids understood things better than adults, understood what actually mattered when everything else got stripped away. You're right, Cole said. We will be. They sat together until Mara came looking for them, until the sun was fully up and it was time to face the day they'd been dreading. The auction was set for 9 o'clock. At 8, they loaded into the wagon. They'd kept that because they needed a way to transport the money and headed for town. Moses trotted alongside, refusing to be left behind. You think they'll let a ram into the courthouse? Ellie asked. Guess we'll find out, Cole said. The town was already busy when they arrived, people going about their morning business. Cole hitched the wagon outside the courthouse and helped Mara down. His hands were shaking. You got the money? Mara asked. He patted his jacket pocket where he'd put the $230. All of it. All except 10. All except 10. They stood there, neither wanting to go inside and face the inevitable. Maybe there's been a miracle, Ellie said. Maybe someone left us money on the steps. There was no money on the steps. There was Vernon, though, standing near the entrance with a smile that made Cole want to knock his teeth out. Well, Vernon drawled. Come to watch the show? Come to stop it, Cole said. With what? The money you don't have? Vernon's smile widened. I've got $300 cash, more than enough to outbid whatever you've scraped together. Cole's blood ran cold. 300, even if they had the full amount, Vernon could outbid them. You don't want this ranch, Mara said. You just want to hurt me. Maybe, but I'll take the ranch as a bonus. Vernon stepped closer. Last chance to be smart about this, Mara. Walk away now, and maybe I'll be generous when it comes to visitation with the girl. Go to hell, Mara said. Vernon laughed and walked inside. Cole stood frozen, mind racing. Even if they had the money, which they didn't, Vernon would outbid them. This was over. They'd lost before they'd even started. Cole? Mara's voice was tight. What do we do? I don't know. You have to know. You always know. I don't. I'm sorry. I don't. Ellie grabbed both their hands. Then we go in there anyway. We try. That's what we do. She was 8 years old and braver than both of them. They walked inside together, Moses somehow slipping through the door before anyone could stop him. The ram positioned himself at Ellie's side, and nobody seemed willing to argue with 200 pounds of protective wool and horns. The auction room was filling up with people. Some were there to bid on various properties being sold. Others were just there to watch. Small-town entertainment. The clerk from yesterday, the one who'd married them, looked up and sighed. Why am I not surprised to see you three? We're here for the Mercer Ranch auction, Cole said. You got the full amount? Cole's jaw tightened. No. Then you can't bid. Rules are rules. I've got $230. That's got to count for something. It counts for being $10 short, which means you don't qualify. The clerk actually looked sorry. I can't change the rules just because I like you. Vernon, sitting in the front row, laughed loud enough for everyone to hear. Mara's hand tightened on Cole's. This was it. They were out of options. And then someone spoke from the back of the room. "I've got $10. Cole turned. A woman he'd never seen before was standing up, holding out a small purse. "I've got $10 if it helps." "I don't understand," Cole said. "I heard about what you're trying to do, about Vernon threatening to take the child. My sister went through something similar. Man used the law to torment her for years." The woman's face was set. "I've got $10, and I'd like to see it go to making sure that doesn't happen to your family." Before Cole could respond, someone else stood up, one of the Henderson boys. "I've got $5 I can add." Then another voice. $3 here. And another. "I can spare 2. Cole watched in disbelief as people he barely knew, some he didn't know at all, started offering money. Small amounts, most of them. $1 here, 50 cents there. Money they probably couldn't afford to give. The clerk was frantically writing everything down, counting bills and coins as they piled up on his desk. Vernon's smile had vanished. "This is ridiculous. You can't just—" "Can't what?" the clerk interrupted. "Can't accept legal tender? Pretty sure I can." He finished counting and looked up. $243.50. More than enough to cover the back taxes. Cole felt Mara sag against him. They'd done it. Somehow, impossibly, they'd done it. But Vernon wasn't finished. "Doesn't matter. I can still outbid them for the property." "Actually, you can't," the clerk said. "Owner showed up with full payment before the auction started. Property's no longer available for bidding. Auction's canceled." "That's not— You can't—" Vernon's face was turning red. "This is fraud, collusion. This is community," the woman who'd offered $10 said, "something you'd know nothing about." Vernon looked around the room, seeing nothing but hostile faces. People who'd watched him drink and threaten and cause trouble for years. People who'd had enough. He stormed out, nearly tripping over Moses on his way. The ram watched him go with what might have been satisfaction. The clerk processed the payment, filled out paperwork, and handed Cole a receipt. "Ranch is officially current on all taxes. You're clear for another year." "I don't know what to say," Cole managed. "Say thank you and get out of my office. I've got other business to handle." But his eyes were kind, and Cole saw him slip an extra $1 into the pile before anyone could stop him. Outside, people were waiting. The ones who'd contributed, the ones who'd just watched, all wanting to know what happened. Cole tried to thank them, but words felt inadequate. How do you thank strangers for saving your home? For believing in your family enough to give money they didn't have? "You just take care of that girl," the woman who'd started it all said. "And if Vernon gives you any more trouble, you let folks know. He's not as powerful as he thinks he is." Henderson appeared, having apparently heard about the auction and come to town. He clapped Cole on the shoulder. "Told you this county needs good people. Glad you're staying." They rode back to the ranch in stunned silence, Moses trotting alongside the wagon. Ellie sat between them, swinging her legs, holding the receipt like it was made of gold. "We really get to stay?" she asked for the third time. "We really get to stay," Mara confirmed. "Forever?" "At least a year. Then we pay taxes again and stay another year." "That's basically forever." Cole found himself laughing, actual, genuine laughter that came from somewhere deep in his chest. They'd done it. Against every odd, against all logic, they'd actually done it. When they reached the ranch, the house looked different somehow, like it had been holding its breath and could finally exhale. The garden stretched toward the creek, green and growing. The fence they'd built together stood strong. Smoke would rise from the chimney again tonight, and tomorrow, and the day after that. This was home, not because of the land or the buildings or the legal papers in Cole's pocket, but because of the people who'd decided to fight for it. That evening, they celebrated with the last of the winter supplies. Mara made a feast out of nothing, and they ate sitting on the floor again because they'd sold the table. Ellie declared it the best meal she'd ever had, even though it was basically beans and bread. After dinner, Cole went out to check on the animals. Moses followed, as always, and they stood together in the yard watching the sun set. "You knew, didn't you?" Cole said to the ram. "Somehow you knew it would work out." Moses huffed, which could have meant anything. Cole thought about the journey that had brought him here. 5 years of running from grief. 5 years of believing he'd lost everything worth having. And then a county notice had dragged him back to face the ruins, and instead of ashes, he'd found life. He'd found Mara, who'd built something beautiful from nothing. Found Ellie, who'd claimed his wife's locket and his heart with equal determination. Found Moses, who'd apparently appointed himself family guardian. He'd found a second chance he didn't deserve, but was grateful for anyway. The door opened behind him. Mara came out wrapped in a shawl against the evening chill. "Ellie wants a story," she said. "She's requesting you tell it." "Me? I don't know any stories." "Make one up. She doesn't care if it's good. She just wants you there." Cole followed her inside, where Ellie was already in bed, Sarah's locket gleaming at her throat. "Tell me about the horse who wanted to be a cloud," she demanded. "I thought you made that one up." "I did, but I want to hear your version." So Cole sat on the edge of her bed and told the worst story in the history of storytelling, making it up as he went along, getting details wrong that Ellie immediately corrected. Mara sat in the doorway listening, and when Cole glanced at her, he saw she was smiling. When Ellie finally fell asleep, they went out to the porch. Their spot. The place where hard conversations happened and where quiet moments stretched between them like promises. "I can't believe we actually did it," Mara said. "Community saved us. All those people who barely know us. They know enough. They know we're trying. That counts for something." Cole pulled her closer, and she leaned against him, her head on his shoulder. They'd been married less than 2 days, and already it felt like forever. Like maybe they'd been heading toward this moment since the day he'd ridden back onto the ranch expecting ghosts. "What happens now?" Mara asked. "We build, we plant, we fix all the things that are broken and make new things that aren't." That's very poetic for a man who just told a story about a cloud horse. "I contain multitudes." She laughed, and the sound settled something in Cole's chest. This was what he'd been missing. Not just a home or a family, but the simple joy of existing beside someone who understood what it took to survive. Spring was coming to the ranch. The ground was softening, ready for planting. The garden beds would be turned again beneath the morning sun. Cole and Mara would work side by side in peaceful silence, while Ellie argued with Moses over which parts of the garden belonged to sheep and which belonged to people. The ranch that once carried only death and loss now overflowed with laughter, work, stubborn animals, and second chances. Cole finally understood the truth he'd spent 5 years avoiding. He hadn't returned to save the land. The land had saved him. The burned ruins where he'd lost everything had become a living garden, built by a woman brave enough to stay when everyone else abandoned it. Instead of selling the ranch and disappearing again, Cole had chosen to build a future there, with Mara, Ellie, and the strange little family fate had placed in his path. And as the warm frontier wind moved through the fields, even old Moses seemed satisfied. He'd known long before anyone else that the lonely stranger who rode onto the ranch was never leaving again. Some people spend their whole lives looking for home. Some are born into it. And some, like Cole, have to lose it completely before they can understand what it means. Home isn't just a place. It's the people who fight for it. The community that shows up with dollars and coins when you need them most. The child who offers her most precious possession to save her family. The ram who guards the door. The woman who rebuilds what others destroy. Home is choosing to stay when running would be easier. It's planting gardens in ashes. It's believing in second chances even when the first chance burned to the ground. Cole had come back expecting to bury the past. Instead, he'd learned that the past doesn't need burying. It needs honoring, remembering, weaving into the fabric of what comes next. Sarah and Thomas would always be part of this land. Their story was written into the foundation stones, the fence posts, the beam in the ceiling where Cole had carved his initials at 20 years old. But now there were new stories too. Mara's story of survival, Ellie's story of resilience, even Moses' story, whatever that was. And Cole's story had finally become something other than grief. It had become redemption, recovery, the messy, imperfect process of learning to live again. The next morning, Cole woke to find Ellie standing beside the bed, Moses peering through the doorway behind her. "We need to plant the garden today," she announced. "Moses says so." "Moses talks now?" "He's always talked. You just weren't listening." Mara groaned and pulled the blanket over her head. "It's barely dawn." Dawn is when gardens get planted. Everyone knows that. So they got up, because arguing with an 8-year-old and a ram was a losing battle. They ate breakfast sitting on the floor, Then went out to the garden beds. Cole turned the soil while Mara marked out rows. Ellie followed behind with seeds, carefully placing them according to some system only she understood. Moses supervised, occasionally eating something he shouldn't, forcing Ellie to lecture him about proper garden etiquette. It was hard work, the kind that made muscles ache and hands blister, the kind that didn't pay immediate dividends, requiring faith that what you planted would eventually grow. But that's what life was, Cole thought as he drove the shovel into the earth. Faith that the seeds would sprout, trust that the rain would come, hope that the work you did today would matter tomorrow. Around noon, Henderson's boys showed up with their furniture. The auction house had sold it, he explained, but then the buyer had immediately donated it back. Said something about paying it forward, the boy said, unloading chairs and the table. Didn't really understand it, but here you go. More kindness from strangers. More evidence that people were better than Cole had let himself believe during his years of wandering. They set up the table in its old spot, and that evening they ate dinner sitting in chairs instead of on the floor. It felt like luxury. I'm going to miss floor dinners, Ellie said. They were more adventurous. We can still have them sometimes, Mara said. Special occasions. Like what? Like whenever you want to sit on the floor. Ellie considered this. That's basically always. After dinner, Cole went out to finish the barn roof repairs he'd started weeks ago. The work had been interrupted by everything else. The fence, the lies, the truth, the desperate scramble for money, but now there was time. Time to fix things properly. Time to build with care instead of urgency. He was hammering in the last shingle when Mara climbed the ladder to join him. Room for two up here? She asked. Always. She sat beside him on the roof, legs dangling over the edge. The sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. From up here you could see the whole property. The garden, the pastures, the creek winding through the eastern section, all of it alive and green and possible. You happy? Mara asked. Cole thought about it. Really thought about it. Was he happy? After 5 years of grief and running and believing happiness was something that happened to other people? Yeah, he said, surprised to find it was true. Yeah, I am. Good, because I'd hate to be married to someone miserable. You were married to someone miserable before. How's this compare? Much better. You actually stick around. They sat together as darkness fell, watching stars appear one by one. The ranch settled in for the night around them, animals bedding down, wind moving through the trees, the house standing solid against the dark. This was the future Cole had built without meaning to. A family assembled from broken pieces. A home resurrected from ruins. A second chance neither of them had asked for, but both had needed. It wasn't perfect. Perfection was a myth anyway. They'd still struggle with money. The land would still be difficult. There would be dry years and wet years, good harvests and bad ones. Vernon might cause trouble again. Other challenges would emerge that they couldn't predict, but they'd face it together. That was the difference. That's what made the struggle worthwhile. Cole? Mara's voice was soft in the darkness. Yeah? Thank you. For staying, for fighting, for becoming part of this crazy mess. Thank you for letting me, for giving me a reason to stop running. Well, you're stuck with us now, legally binding and everything. Wouldn't have it any other way. They climbed down from the roof eventually, going inside where Ellie was already asleep. Moses curled up beside her bed in clear violation of the no rams in the house rule that nobody had actually enforced. Cole and Mara stood in the doorway, watching the girl sleep, the locket glinting in the lamplight. She's going to grow up here, Mara whispered, on this land, with stability and safety and people who love her. Yeah, she is. That's all I ever wanted, just that. Cole put his arm around her shoulders. Then we did good. We did. They left Ellie sleeping and went to their own room, lay in bed listening to the ranch breathe around them. The creak of wood settling, the rustle of wind through grass, the distant call of an owl. This was home, messy and imperfect and hard-won, built from ashes and grief and determination, saved by community and stubbornness and a ram who'd decided a stranger was worth protecting. Cole had spent 5 years running from the past, believing that moving forward meant leaving everything behind. But he'd been wrong. You didn't move forward by running. You moved forward by standing still, by planting seeds and building fences and choosing to stay even when staying was hard. The past didn't need to be buried. It needed to be remembered, honored, woven into the foundation of what came next. Sarah and Thomas would always be part of this place, but now Mara and Ellie were part of it too. And somehow, impossibly, there was room for all of them. Outside, Moses huffed in his sleep, probably dreaming of chasing rabbits he'd never eat. In the garden, seeds were settling into the soil, preparing to grow. And in the house where Cole had once lost everything, a new family slept, safe and together and home. The ranch had been many things: a dream, a tragedy, a ruin, a salvation. Now it was simply what it had always meant to be, a place where people could put down roots and grow. And that, Cole thought, as sleep finally claimed him, was more than enough. That was everything.